There is one reason the public educational system is failing, and that is a lack of education. Competition between schools helps create a complete learning experience and for children. There is one city that implements school choice to much success. There are potential problems, though, that you can run into that do need to be solved. School choice improves the quality of education through competition and access to education beyond what we see today. But before we find a solution, we have to figure out what's wrong. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, publicly funded high schools have an average GPA of 2.92 and have an average of 83% graduation rate, while private schools have a GPA of 3.16 and a graduation rate of 96%. That is 10% higher graduation rate than that of the public school. And fourth grade reading level for the public schools is 14.7 points lower than the average private school. And by 8th grade, that is jumped up to 18.1% more. The difference between public and private school is baffling. But what does that have to do with school choice? I believe that it's because public schools don't have to compete while private schools do. Instead of competing with other schools, the public schools are broken up into districts, and each district goes to a different school. And because they don't have to compete, they don't have to innovate. Like a private school, if the students there grades are dropping and the reading level is lower, parents will move the students to a different school, and thus the school will go out of business. Well, public schools, they don't have to worry about students leaving, so they don't have to innovate and change like private schools do. And the competition prevents the stagnation. But how do you create competition in a public school? Remember that city I mentioned earlier? Yeah, that city was Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, each student received about $5,000, a grant for $5,000 to go to every school they wanted to. This is about $2,000 less than the funding that a public school got per student. Schools were not allowed to charge any additional fees above this. And the area had a graduation rate of about 40% and the average GPA of D+, or 2.0. At one school, the Messenger High School, it had at the end of this, it had a 97% attendance rate, and 87% of the students there actually ended up going to college. And even based on the national average, that's stunning. The school was accused of taking the cream of the crop, but that's not the case. It had very similar demographics to the area around it, and about 60% of the school was made up of children from low-income families. Without any competition, schools stagnate. And like in all things, if you are guaranteed the same result with less work, people are going to do less work. Competition between these Milwaukee schools created the best learning environment for the children. When it comes to school choice, there are risks involved and potential problems you could run into, such as how do you prevent segregation? The answer is you have to do sort of like anti-segregation laws, where you have to have similar demographics to what you have now, or what you have in your area to what you have in your school. Another problem that you could run into is how do you prevent school monopolies? So like one school just controlling the large area. You'd have to either make some sort of laws against that, or it also would be rather difficult for that to happen just based on how public schools or private schools are. But even if it did happen, it would just go back to what we have now, which is just one monopoly, especially for low-income families, such as if you have a low-income family who can't homeschool or can't send their kids to a private school, they're forced to go to a public school, no matter whether or not their kids are getting bad grades or not. Competition creates innovation, which helps the children learn. Schools in Milwaukee are the best representation of this in school choice. Now you'll have to test this in small areas before you can actually take it nationwide. And there will always be hiccups when you first start out. Local lawmakers will have to help run out these hiccups and make sure it fits into the area. Although there are many problems with the educational system, it can be improved to create innovation and new learning opportunities and tools for kids in K-12 schools. And this is all done through competition.